As with everything else we've seen with XML, XSL, HTML, CSS, you can also do comments. Comments again help you flag, say, problem code or code for further review. Allows you to basically leave notes for yourself or down the road if you want to figure out, like, why do I have this code? In my website, in my course website where I use CSS, I will label things because it can get very confusing, especially as your website grows, what the CSS is actually used for. You might say, oh, okay, I know it. All the heading ones are going to be red, but you may be using different heading ones, and you may have different CSS that conflict with each other. So anyways, comments are indispensable when you're building your website. Here's an example how it might work. You would have basically a / asterisk and then another asterisk and / to have a block of comments. Comments are your friend. There's ways to insert CSS to make it work in your HTML and XSL. You can do it externally, internally, or inline styles. Basically, it's inside the tags. Inline styles, you basically insert the CSS right within the HTML tag. They're very quick, so if you're learning CSS, it's a nice way to get your feet wet very quickly and learn a little bit about it, but they're difficult to maintain, and again, that's a theme in this course where you're always looking, do I take the quickest route now but pay for it later, or do I sort of pay for, I guess, the complexity up front and try to make my code nice and neat and very compartmentalized, so that way it's easier to maintain down the road. So long story short, use them sparingly. If you're building a little website for your own personal use or something, you can throw one in here or there, but if you're really planning on keeping a website for long term and having it grow, stay away from inline styles. And here's basically how they work. You have your heading 1 tag, and then you type in style and you set that equal to whatever you're going to do. It all goes into a set of quotation marks, and then you're done. Very verbose. Again, if you were to build out a site using this, it would get very unmanageable very quickly. Internal or embedded CSS. This is, I guess, how I got familiar with using cascading style sheets in my own work. Typically, they're placed right at the top of the page. If you remember, we could do document type definitions internally. Same thing for CSS. You can stick it right in the HTML file or XSL file for our purposes. They're very convenient for small web pages, and this, I'd say, it's not so bad to use these if your site's not going to get very big. But over time, if you're in a big organization or you're working on a big website, that CSS will become hard to manage using it internally or embedded. And here's what it might look like internally. You'd have your HTML head. You're going to do this style. This is sort of a recipe, if you will. Style, type, and you set it equal to text / CSS. Just tells the parser, indeed, you're going to be using CSS to style your HTML. And then here we've got a little bit of CSS. We got a P tag that's going to be styled and our body tag, and we can set color equal to white and background color equal to black. We close that out, style and head, and then in the body of our HTML, and you could put this right in with XSL as well, you'd use a P tag and your body tag, and then here's how it gets rendered as you'd see it in a browser. Again, internal, fine. For the exercise, we're going to split. We're going to do external, but if you're doing this on your own or building some site in your work life, internal is fine to use up to a point. External, this is really a preferred method. It's kind of like the same way when we've done external document type definitions or external schema, XML schemas. They're just much easier to manage. A little bit more work up front, but down the road it makes your website just way more sustainable in the long run. So it keeps your website design and content separate. The CSS code, you can actually reuse it. You could have multiple HTML pages or XSL pages that link to that CSS file. So that's nice. You don't it's less typing, so you're not having to basically copy and paste or type in the same CSS code for every single XSL file you're using. XSL file that you're using, or HTML file using. You just type it once and then you're done. Same way for updates. If you're going to do an update, all you have to do is update once, and it just basically cascades, if you will, through all your XSLT style sheets or your HTML. So again, makes massive alterations, very easy to do and very powerful. You can basically keystroke and you can change a bunch of things in your website. Here's the recipe you're going to follow for this. In your .xsl file, you're going to link out to your CSS file this way. So you'd have head, which you have in your XSL file, and then link, and here's where you're going to link, and then this is the recipe you follow. I would just copy and paste it and place it right in your .xsl file. You're going to have style sheet, type, again the text / CSS, and then you're going to have this href, hypertext hyperlink reference, and then it'll go to whatever your .css file is called. That's what you'll put in there, and then you close it out with head. Browsers and CSS, we're now in a world where basically any browser that's worth its weight in salt supports CSS. Now we're in the world of HTML5, and HTML5 was a real game changer in the web development world. When we went from HTML4 to HTML5, it opened up all sorts of possibilities, and you're going to get to see them. This week we'll do CSS, and I think either next week or the following we're going to do scalable vector graphics. Again, you're going to start to see that the browser is turning into a multimedia platform where you can do all sorts of animations, graphics, and do all sorts of fancy styling of your XML content using cascading style sheets, and as we'll see, scalable vector graphics. It can make a very powerful visual presentation of your XML content. If you haven't already, be sure that you go through and work on your the module that I assigned. The CSS tutorials are great to work with. They allow you to do some trial and error with code right in the browser, and all the different kinds of CSS selectors that we learned about, you'll get to use them firsthand right there, and it's a great way to learn how to use cascading style sheets.